Normally in the early time when Paul was writing this to the Romans, to become a Christian was to literally physically suffer. There is a transition period in this life which verse 21 and 23 carefully explains. The creation itself also will be set free from its slavery to corruption into the freedom of the glory of the children of God. But also we ourselves, having the first fruit of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting eagerly for the adoption of sons, the redemption of our body. We are going to suffer in many areas of our life, whether it's mentally, physically, if it's in different areas that we suffer with our thoughts and our ideas. In other words, there is a parallel experience going on between creation and the children of God. There is this ultimate plan of freedom alongside this distasteful life experience. And although we are the Lord's, we still are affected by a sin-stained world. Some people ask, why does bad things happen to good people? Because we live in a stinking world. Don't we? Don't we suffer at the hands of the world and the people that's in it? Under the regime of dictators across the world that exercise their theocracy over people and cause them to live in such horrible conditions along the world. As Christians, we are caught in the frailty of our human bodies. I don't care how much we watch TV and they tell us how to keep our body in shape. I really don't know how much green smoothies and fruit smoothies help the body. When I mow the grass, I still suffer when I finish mowing the grass, when I'm pushing with my mower. I realize how frail my body is. But I enjoy the suffering when I look and see how great the grass looks. But we still have frailties in our bodies. Our real potential is hidden behind the weakness of our human bodies. They have not experienced redemption even though our souls have. My body hasn't got redeemed yet. One day I will have a perfect body, though I have been redeemed spiritually and been freed from the curse of sin, and I can have peace within me. My body is still cursed. For this reason, hope will characterize our lives. We inherently know and long for the full realization of all that God promises us. My hope is not what I can see. Why should I hope that I have a house to live in when I do have a house to live in? Why should I hope for a car that rides good when I have a car that rides good? I don't hope to have a better body in the future. Unfortunately, I'm experiencing that as I get older, my body is not going to be as good as it was when it was 12 or 13 or 14. My hope is not that my body is going to get better, because it's going to wear out if I live long enough. So my hope is that I have a hope in the redemption of my body, and when I get to heaven, I will have a new body that goes along with my freedom of my soul. And that is the pattern very clearly set in verse 17 and verse 18. In Romans 8:17, it starts by connecting suffering with glorification. If indeed we suffer with Him, in order that we may also be glorified in Him. Now here's the joy. Suffering is connected with glorification. Suffering is connected with being glorified in Him. So then if I can understand that the suffering that my body goes through, if it's for the glory of God, then my perspective is this suffering is for a purpose. And it's in God and not in myself. Whereas the artist killed himself because his suffering was self-inflicted because it sought him. Whereas if a believer is a Christian, he sees his suffering as part of this world, and he also sees that this suffering is going to bring about my glorification and bring about the glory of God. Paul's addressing God's children living on the edge of two worlds. I've got one foot in heaven and one foot in the earth. Some of us are more closely to the earth. We don't know that, do we? Because when you read the newspaper and I see someone 54 die, somebody 53 die, someone 63 die, it doesn't, we see all different ages. We don't know how close we are. One group of people are caught in the web of sin and death, and the others have stepped into life and light. I've stepped into God's glorious light and privileges. I've been saved. However, like those bound in darkness are still suffering even though they have escaped the curse of sin through justification. I have escaped the sin and the death of sin. And perhaps Paul sensed the impending persecution against Christians as he writes to Rome. In any case, the Roman Christians greatly suffered and needed a theology to take them through. Can they get through? We don't suffer for Christians' sake. Can you say that as I'm suffering, even in our physical body, that it's not going to be for nothing? I'd hate to suffer all of my life and find out when I die I'd go to hell. I'm glad through this suffering that one day God's going to give us a whole new body. We should not therefore be surprised when God sometimes takes what is perfect and subjects it to a humble status so that a great good might be accomplished. So then don't worry about when someone says, how come bad things happen to good people? That is not in your vocabulary. Why does God allow bad things to happen to good people while good things happen to bad people? Can I share with you? I'm glad bad things happen to good people rather than good things happen to bad people. I'm glad at least God allows them on this earth to have a few good years, because they're lost without Christ and they're going to suffer the rest of their life. So let me share with you something. Because a lost person has a lot of good, it looks like a lot of good stuff in their lives, just like this Facebook guy who turned 28, and they say that his company now is worth $100 billion. Let him. I don't envy that. If he's not a Christian, he'll take nothing with him. I'd rather die a pauper and have nothing and have Christ and have everything when I get to heaven. Of course, it does have to have a little bit on the way, doesn't it? This stage of suffering is merely a transitional period. We should remember that it is the man that sinned. Because of God's grace, both the creation and Christ Jesus had to suffer. Because of what one man did, Adam, the world became under a sin curse. And it's God's grace and Jesus Christ's suffering that provides the means that we can have life after this. If man did not sin, then both the creation and Christ would not have had to suffer at all. But somehow, through God's amazing grace, in the face of man's awful sin, a great or good resulted. Psalms 22:24 says, "For he has not despised nor abhorred the affliction of the afflicted, neither has he hidden his face from him. But when he cried to help from him, he heard." And in Psalms, he says, I've heard the afflicted. I've heard the sorrow. I've heard the groaning. And can I share with you, it's coming down. We're going to learn tonight of the redemptive history. And we're going to learn that God had a plan put in place, that His Son Jesus Christ would be born in order to provide the means that though we may suffer in this world, there's going to come a time that we don't have to suffer forever. It's all according to His purpose. Have we not read Romans 8:28 along with the former verses of adoption and the latter ones for calling, all because our spiritual backbone? The truth is, this verse is incredible. Romans 8:28. God can and will work all things for a higher good, no matter what sickness, shortness of life, poverty, persecution, difficulty in life, family rejection, or even horrible physical features we might have. We can fully trust God to bring about a greater good. In other words, in His wise provision, the trials are designed to further His good purpose. I want you to know that no matter what trials you go through with, God has a higher purpose. Trials are to be expected. I can't believe God will allow this. I can't believe God will have me through all these trials, as good as I am. For higher good, God has a way for that. Suffering is part of this life. We are to keep our faith and even strengthen our trust in Him during times of trials, for God will create a greater good out of it. It's great to know that everything will work out for us in the end, isn't it? It's our hope. Verse 18 says, For I consider that the suffering of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed to us. And as we have tried to establish over these lessons in chapter 8, that the purpose of the whole 8th chapter of this book of Romans is to show Christian believers the way to have full assurance of their salvation.